In Ecuador, prison authorities confirmed the transfer of former Vice President Jorge Glas to the Guayas Regional Detention Center following his kidnapping during the assault on the Mexican embassy. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces committed 4 massacres in the last 24 hours, killing at least 46 civilians in Gaza. And in Russia, the bursting of a dam in the old city of Orsk left over 11,000 people affected by the resulting floods. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from TeleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Former Vice President of Ecuador Jorge Glas was transferred to the Guayas Regional Detention Center in the city of Guayaquil. Social movements denounced the Ecuadorian government for violating human and diplomatic rights following the raid on the Mexican embassy, which led to the kidnapping of the former vice president. Jorge Glas is already in the vicinity of the maximum security prison La Roca, where criminal leaders are being held. The Citizens' Revolution movement denounced that Glas did not have access to his defense, and his lawyers have not been able to see him since his arrest at the Mexican embassy. In this context, Mexico severed diplomatic relations with Ecuador after Ecuadorian police broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito and kidnapped former Vice President Jorge Glas. The incident occurred this Friday night, hours after the Mexican government granted Glas political asylum amidst diplomatic tensions between both countries. The information was confirmed by the Ecuadorian presidency through a statement in which it detailed that Jorge Glas Espinal was arrested and placed under the orders of the competent authorities. Mexico announced on Friday granting of the political asylum requested by Glas, one day after Ecuador declared the Mexican ambassador Raquel Meque persona non grata for declarations made by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador on the Ecuadorian electoral context in 2023. The Ecuadorian government kidnapped Jorge Glas after he requested political asylum in the Mexican embassy. The Attorney General's office opened a political investigation against former Vice President Glas in 2017, during which he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for receiving bribes from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. In 2022, he was released on parole halfway through his sentence. However, Ecuadorian authorities continued the judicial process arbitrarily, and the politician was summoned at the end of last year to answer for the case of misappropriation of funds. Since then, Glas sought diplomatic refuge in the Mexican embassy, resulting in a diplomatic rift in bilateral relations between the government of Ecuador and Mexico. Mexico's Foreign Affairs Ministry issued an official statement on its X account regarding the raid that led to the arrest of former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glas inside Mexico's embassy in Ecuador. The statement reads, given the brutal invasion perpetrated by the Ecuadorian police at the Mexican embassy Friday night, April 5th, and as per instructions given by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Mexico announced the severing of diplomatic relations with Ecuador. Mexico strongly condemns the acts of violence carried out against Mexico's mission head of Roberto Canseco Martinez, as well as the arbitrary arrest of former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glas Espinal, who was at the embassy seeking political asylum given the persecution he was being subjected to. Mexico will go before the International Court of Justice to denounce violations of international law by Ecuador, as well as before relevant regional and international bodies. Mexico's Foreign Affairs Ministry demands a thorough investigation of the attack and reiterates its commitment to fight all forms of violence. In the face of the bursting in the government of Daniel Noboa to the Mexican embassy in Quito, the former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, pointed out that this diplomatic violation did enormous damage to all Ecuadorians inside and outside the country.
The stupidity that the government of Daniel Noboa has just done, breaking the international law in a flagrant way without precedents. This is a declaration of war. It is an invasion of a country's territory. Can you imagine how it exposes our embassy? Now anyone is going to invade our embassy. Can you imagine how it exposes our migrants, because if they are undocumented and get into a church, a safe place, the police will not think of dragging them out. Can you imagine when we are going to get a visa for Europe? Can you imagine how many investments are going to come to the country? Well, how much damage it has done is enormous. Can you imagine when we are going to obtain the visa for Europe? Can you imagine how many investments are going to come to the country? I mean, the damage that has been done is enormous. Mexico is the 12th second economy in the world, the second largest in Latin America, and here comes a conceited child who thinks he is in his haciendas to kick the dog, and he hurts all Ecuadorians.
The former Ecuadorian president Rafael Correa questioned the actions of Daniel Noboa's government since he pointed out that according to the Vienna Convention, diplomatic headquarters are foreign territory and are under the jurisdiction of the ambassador.
According to the Vienna Convention, diplomatic delegations are foreign soil of the respective country to which that delegation belongs. You enter that diplomatic delegation and you lose your authority. The authority is with the ambassador. The diplomatic hierarchy within the embassy is a treaty that all countries have signed because that is the other barbarity of Noboa. He argues international law to breach international rights, which is a legal aberration. Ask any first-year law student.
The former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, said that the kidnapping of former Vice President Jorge Glas by the government of Daniel Noboa has no precedent in the history of mankind.
Jorge Glas had been granted asylum and they come in to kidnap because that is the exact term, violating the diplomatic headquarters, breaking the Vienna Commission. They come in to kidnap an asylum seeker. That has no precedent in the history of mankind.
Nicaragua condemns the political attack by the Ecuadorian government and expresses its solidarity with the people and government of Mexico. The government of Nicaragua, through an official statement, said the government of reconciliation and national unity of blessed and always free Nicaragua expresses its absolute rejection and condemnation of the neo-fascist political barbarism of the government of Ecuador, whose admirable people deserve, as always, all our affection, support, and solidarity. The text added, "We condemn and reject this flagrant violation of international law that we see perpetrated by corrupt and servile rulers of empires who unfortunately occupied institutional positions in that broader country." It also stated, "We learn with astonishment of the complicity of another recent Ecuadorian government with the assault on its own headquarters in London to violently and illegally arrest Julian Assange, a journalist that the world claims and whose work allowed to no one disclose more about the imperialist atrocities in the sovereign countries intervened, occupied, and destroyed by the fierce barbarians." It also emphasized, in view of the unusual and reprehensible action carried out early this morning in Quito by forces that should be protecting security and order of Ecuadorian citizens and their lives, we express our forceful, emphatic, and irrevocable rejection, which we convert into our sovereign decision to break off all diplomatic relations with the Ecuadorian government. At the same time that we express once again our warm and consistent consideration for the beloved Ecuadorian people who are living through times of inconceivable brutality, and we ratify once again our adherence to international law and the conventions that govern civilized relations between states and governments of the world. Finally, it stated, on September 1st, 2020, we had withdrawn our embassy in Quito, and with the statement, we formalized the rupture of all diplomatic relations. Our solidarity and accompaniment in any legal action derived from this to the President and Government of Mexico, Mr. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The Alba TCP Secretary General Jorge Arreaza strongly rejected the police raid at the Mexican embassy in Ecuador. Regarding the incident, Arreaza said the government of Ecuador is seriously at fault. They have gone from an international order based on rules to an international order based on their rules. The Alba TCP governments will be issuing a statement on the matter in the coming hours. Meanwhile, Chilean President Gabriel Boric said all our solidarity is with Mexico in the face of the unacceptable violation of its sovereignty through a raid by Ecuadorian police on the Mexican embassy in Quito, a fraternal embrace for López Obrador. The governments of Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, and former Bolivian President Evo Morales have all expressed solidarity regarding the violation of the asylum right of former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glas. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel wrote, "All our solidarity is with Mexico for the unacceptable violation of its embassy in Quito. Everyone should respect the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations as an essential component of international law." Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said, "It is an act of barbarism, something never seen before in Latin America. The right-wing pro-Yankee government of Ecuador brutally violated international law, assaulting the Mexican embassy in Ecuador and kidnapping a political asylum seeker acknowledged as such by the Mexican government." Venezuela forcefully raises its voice to reject this fascist act against international law and to express Venezuela's full and absolute solidarity with Mexican President López Obrador and the people of Mexico. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, through his X account, said Colombia will prompt the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to issue precautionary measures in favor of Jorge Glas, whose right to asylum has been barbarically violated. The Organization of American States, the OAS, and the Latin America and the Caribbean Community of States, CELAC, must meet urgently to examine the violation of the Vienna Convention by a member state. Also on X, Brazilian President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva wrote, "All my solidarity is with President and friend López Obrador." Meanwhile, former Bolivian President Evo Morales said what the government of Ecuador has done is very serious. It has violated the territorial sovereignty of Mexico and international law. We demand that the government of Bolivia severs diplomatic ties with the government of Ecuador over this affront to Mexico, to the right of asylum, and to Latin American integration. Our full solidarity is with Comrade Jorge Glas. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador welcomed on his X account the numerous expressions of solidarity with his nation. López Obrador wrote, "We appreciate the solidarity of leaders and civil organizations from different countries and our own. After the assault on the Mexican embassy in Ecuador, we respect the brotherly people of Ecuador, and we ask our fellow citizens to behave with great caution to avoid harassment and not fall into any provocation. We are attentive to the diplomats of our country. They are not alone. They have shown dignity and decorum, as was evident in the attitude of Raquel Cerur, our ambassador, and Roberto Canseco, head of the embassy's chancery. Alicia Bárcena, Secretary of Foreign Affairs, is handling this painful matter professionally and effectively." And in the midst of this serious situation, different politicians and authorities make reference to the violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Let's review what the text says. The Vienna Convention provides in the first instance that the premises of the mission are inviolable and that the agents of receiving state may not enter them without the consent of the head of the mission. Secondly, that the receiving state has a special obligation to take all appropriate measures to protect the premises of the mission against intrusion or damage. And finally, that the premises of the mission, their furnishings, and other property therein shall not be subject to any search, requisition, attachment, or enforcement action. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Israeli occupation forces killed at least 46 people in 4 massacres perpetrated in the last 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. Gaza and health authorities reported that the total number of Palestinians killed since October 2023 rose to 33,137, mostly children and women. The recent massacres also left 65 people wounded, bringing this figure to 75,815. These numbers could increase in the next days, as many victims and corpses still remain under debris due to the Israeli forces obstructing the passage of ambulances and rescue teams. The United Nations criticized the United States' decision to sell fighter jets to Israel. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, questioned Washington's decision and denounced the damage caused to the infrastructure in Gaza has a cost of more than $18 billion, the approximate value of each of the F-15 planes offered to Israel. The rapporteur also insisted on the need to enforce an arms embargo and other sanctions against Israel in order to stop the genocide being carried out against Palestinians in Gaza. In the United States, 36 congressmen demand an end to arms transfers to Israel. According to local media, 36 representatives of the Democratic Party, among them the former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, asked U.S. President Joe Biden to stop arming Tel Aviv's army. Parliamentarians called for an investigation into the Israeli airstrike on Monday, April 1st, which killed 7 employees of a charity organization working in Gaza. They also stated that given the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, there would be no justification for approving new arms shipments to the Israeli occupation. The UN Human Rights Council called for an arms embargo on Israel amidst the genocide committed against the Palestinian people. In a resolution adopted Friday by 28 votes to 6 with 13 abstentions, the 47 members of the Human Rights Council supported a call to stop the sale, transfer and funneling of arms, ammunition and other military equipment to Israel, the occupying power, to prevent further violations of international humanitarian law and human rights violations and abuses. The measure was submitted by Pakistan on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and was co-sponsored by Bolivia, Cuba and the State of Palestine. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin American and Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Honduras, the Secretariat of Risk Management and National Contingencies declared a yellow alert and green alert in several departments for a period of 48 hours. The yellow alert was declared for the city of La Ceiba in the Caribbean. Provisional evacuations are foreseen in regions with risk of landslides, floods, or overflowing of rivers, while the green alert was issued for the departments of Colón and Atlántida. These alerts are due to a prefrontal throw as well as heavy rains that will cause an increase in the flow of rivers, mainly the Cangrejal in La Ceiba, which may impede access to several communities. In China, rescue operations continue on the island of Taiwan for several people trapped in the Taroko National Park after last Wednesday's 7.4 earthquake. According to the latest figures from the Emergency Response Center, 442 people remain stranded in Taroko National Park, one of the island's main tourist spots, while 6 others are still missing. On Saturday, rescuers found the 13th fatality, a 21-year-old woman buried by rocks on the Shakangdang Trail. So far, 1,145 people were reported injured. In Greece, authorities evacuated over 300 people from 4 towns on the island of Crete on Saturday due to the proximity of a forest fire. According to the fire department, these fires have so far left 1 person seriously injured, currently in a hospital center receiving medical attention in the intensive care unit for burns and respiratory problems. 120 firefighters are involved in the task of trying to contain the flames of the forest fire that has spread along the slopes of a mountainous area in the east of the island, fueled by strong winds blowing in the region. Greece suffered the most devastating fires recorded in Europe since the beginning of the century last summer, which razed more than 150,000 hectares and left 27 dead. In Russia, authorities report over 11,000 people affected by floods resulting from the bursting of a dam in the old town of Orsk. The Russian Emergency Ministry said that rescuers were deployed to evacuate the residents of the area. Citizens are being transferred to temporary accommodation centers. Authorities are providing them with specialist medical personnel, food services, and places to sleep. Officials stated that more than 600 houses are underwater, of which close to 300 could be severely damaged. In the United Kingdom, train drivers from 16 railway companies will go on strike between Saturday, April 6th and Monday, the 8th, to demand better salaries. This strike threatens to disrupt travel for thousands of people. The Union of the Associated Society of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen indicated that drivers are being asked to sacrifice their working conditions in exchange for a wage increase. Train operators, for their part, say that a change in the way they work is necessary for wages to be increased due to the current economic challenges. In 2023, the union had been presented with an offer of a supposed 4% wage increase. However, negotiations with the companies have since stalled. In the last 2 years, the United Kingdom experienced a wave of strikes in different sectors demanding wage improvements to cope with the rising cost of living. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.